Hi everyone. Whenever you will compare two or more groups in your research studies, there might be something called confounding variables in your research. The confounding variables make it very difficult to draw conclusion about the cause and effect relationship because we can't pin down exactly what is the cause of any pattern in the data observed after the intervention. So in today's video, I am going to explain how you can control for these confounding variables. This is done to maximize the internal validity of a research. When the researcher wants to identify the cause and effect relationship, the researcher needs to control the confounding variables in order to rule them out as explanation for any effect observed. Researchers use a variety of strategies to control for these confounding variables. So in today's video, let me explain what are some of the ways you can control the confounding variables in your research. The first strategy is to keeping things constant. When a factor is the same for everyone, it cannot possibly account for any differences observed. Oftentimes, researchers ensure that different treatments are imposed in the same or very similar environments. They may also seek research participants who share a certain characteristic such as age, gender, grade level, or even socioeconomic status. Keep in mind, however, that restricting the nature of one's sample may then lower the external validity or the generalizability of any findings obtained. The second strategy is to include a control group. Now, let me describe a study in which an industrial psychologist begins playing classical music as employees in a typing pool go about their daily task of typing documents. At the end of the month, the psychologist finds that the typist's productivity is 30% higher than it was during the preceding month. The increase in productivity may or may not be due to the classical music. There are too many possible confounding variables. Personal changes, nature of the documents being typed, number of people out sick or on vacation during the 2-month period, even just the knowledge that an experiment is being conducted, that may also account for the typing pool's increased productivity. To better control for such extraneous variables, researchers frequently include a control group, a group that receives either no intervention or a neutral intervention that could have little or no effect on the dependent variable. The researchers then compare the performance of this group to an experimental group, also known as a treatment group, that actually participates in an intervention. People sometimes show improved performance simply because they know that they are participating in a research study. This phenomena is often known as the Hawthorne effect. To take this fact into account, a researcher sometimes gives the people in a control group a placebo that might on the surface appear to be influential, but in reality should not be influential. For instance, a researcher studying the effects of a new arthritis medication might give some participants a particular dosage of the medicine and give others a similar looking sugar pill. Or a researcher investigating a new approach to treating test anxiety might use the new treatment with some individuals but give others general relaxation training that, although possibly beneficial in other ways, won't necessarily address their test anxiety. Here I must emphasize quite strongly that any researcher who incorporates placebos in a study must consider three ethical issues related to the use of placebos. First is the principle of informed consent, where participants in the study must be told that the study includes a placebo treatment as well as an experimental treatment, and that they won't know which treatment they have received until the study has ended. Secondly, if participants in the study have actively sought help for a medical, psychological, or other significant problem, those who initially received the placebo treatment should, at the conclusion of the study, be given the opportunity to receive more effective treatment. This is assuming, of course, that the treatment is more effective than the placebo. Third, and most important, when studying a treatment related to life-threatening situations, for example, a new drug for terminal cancer, the researchers must seriously weigh the benefits of the new knowledge that can be gained by a control group receiving no treatment, or perhaps a less intensive version of the experimental intervention, and also the lives might be saved by including all participants in the treatment group. We cannot possibly stress enough that should you find yourself having to make a decision about the best research design to use in a life and death situation, you should always consult with your professional colleagues and the internal review board at your institution as well as your own conscience. The third strategy is randomly assigning people to groups. There is value of selecting people at random to participate in a descriptive research study. Such random selection enhances the probability that any results obtained for the sample also apply to the population from which the sample has been drawn. In experimental studies, researchers use random selection for a different purpose: to assign participants within their sample to various groups. In any research study involving human beings or other living things, members of the sample are apt to be different from one another in many ways that are relevant to the variables under investigation. For example, there could be a situation in which a researcher wants to compare two methods of teaching elementary school science. The students in the study will almost certainly differ from one another in intelligence, motivation, educational opportunities at home, and other factors that will affect their performance on the achievement test given at the end of the school year. It would be virtually impossible to control for such variables by having all students in the study having the same intelligence, the same motivation, the same kinds of outside opportunities. As an alternative to keeping some characteristics the same for everyone, a researcher can instead randomly assign participants to groups. When people have been selected for one group or another on a random basis, the researcher can reasonably assume that on average the groups are quite similar and that any differences between them are due entirely to chance. In fact, many inferential statistical tests, especially those that allow a researcher to make comparisons among two or more groups, are based on the assumption that group membership is randomly determined and that any pre-treatment differences between the groups result from chance alone. So number 4 strategy is to use one or more pre-tests to assess equivalence before the treatment. Sometimes random assignment to two different groups simply isn't possible. For instance, researchers may have to study groups that already exist. Example, students in classrooms, participants in different medical treatment programs, so on. An alternative in this situation is to assess other variables that might influence the dependent variable and determine whether the groups are similar with respect to those variables. If the groups are similar, the probability that such variables could account for any future group differences is then reduced considerably. Another strategy is to identify matched pairs of people, one in each of two groups being compared, who are identical or very similar with respect to characteristics that might possibly have an effect on the dependent variable. For example, a researcher comparing the achievement test scores of students in two different instructional programs might identify pairs of students of the same age and gender who have similar IQ scores. A researcher comparing two different treatments for a particular illness might match patients according to age, gender, and duration and intensity of the illness. In either case, the researcher does not study the data collected for all people in the two groups, only the people who are part of the matched sets that he or she has identified. A researcher who uses this approach should, in the final research report, explain in what ways the participants in the studies have been matched, for example by saying pairs were matched on the basis of age, gender, and previous grade point average. One problem with assessing before treatment equivalence with pretest is that researcher rules out only the variables that he or she has actually assessed and determined to be equivalent across groups. The design does not rule out other influential factors that the researcher hasn't assessed and perhaps not even considered. The fifth strategy is exposing participants to all experimental treatments. Another strategy for controlling for individual differences is to use participants as their own controls. That is, to have every participant in the study undergo all experimental and controlled treatments, and then assess the effects of each treatment individually or independently. Any independent variable that is systematically varied for every participant is known as within subjects variable, and an approach that includes a within subjects variable is known as within subjects design. Let's take an example now. Let's say there are three different lecture methods and their possible effects on recall for lecture content. This sample here consists of volunteer students who were enrolled in three sections of an undergraduate class in educational psychology. And they were given the lecture just 3 times, once to each class. The lecture was about a little known American Civil War battle that participants were unlikely to have learned about in school. Thus, participants' prior knowledge about the battle was a constant. They all had zero prior knowledge rather than a confounding variable. The researcher divided the lecture into 3 parts of approximately equal length and wrote 3 versions of each part, one version each for the imagery, attention, and control conditions. She combined the 3 versions of the 3 lecture parts such that each class received the different treatments in a different sequence, as you see on your screen. In this manner, all participants in the study were exposed to the 2 treatments and the control condition, and each condition occurred in all possible places, first, second, and third in sequence. So you can see with the study, as you see on your screen, the researcher used a within subjects variable where the type of intervention was imagery versus attention versus control to compensate for the fact that participants had not been randomly assigned to the 3 class sections in her sample. Sometimes researchers use a sample strategy with just a single group and in some cases with just a single individual. The final strategy is of course statistically controlling for confounding variables. Sometimes researchers can control for known confounding variables at least in part through statistical techniques. Such techniques as partial correlation analysis of covariance, often known as ANCOVA, and structured equation modeling known as SEM are suitable for this purpose. Should you choose to use one of them in your research, I urge you to consult one or more statistics books for guidance about their use and appropriateness for various research situations. Keep in mind, however, that statistically controlled confounding variables is no substitute for controlling for them in one research design if all possible. A carefully controlled experimental design is the only approach that allows you to draw firm conclusions about the cause and effect between the 2 variables. So guys, once you decide on how you are going to identify the confounding variables, make sure you include measures to control them, otherwise there will be a lot of questions from the examiners and reviewers once they read your research report. Thank you for watching today's video. I try to keep my videos short, but I look forward to getting any kind of feedback and comments from you, and I'll see you soon with my next video. Bye for now.